The food my husband cooked with his own hands was never meant to nourish me. It was meant to end my pregnancy and my life. But fate made one cruel change. I didn't eat it. His mistress did. And that single mistake destroyed his career, his secret family, and exposed the monster I was married to. The morning my life almost ended began with a smile. Not just any smile, but his. The kind I hadn't seen in months. When my office door opened, I expected my assistant or another stack of reports. Instead, my husband stood there, framed by the soft morning light, holding a sleek thermal food container in both hands. He looked gentle, warm, almost loving. For a moment, I forgot how distant he'd been lately. "Good morning," he said softly. "Happy anniversary." 3 years of marriage. 3 years of shared success, shared silence, and lately, shared secrets. I stared at him, confused. My husband was never spontaneous, never affectionate without reason. He lived by schedules, meetings, and control. So seeing him here, unannounced, with breakfast, made my chest tighten in a way I couldn't explain. "I made this for you," he continued, placing the container carefully on my desk. "You've been working too hard. You look pale." The lid twisted open. Steam rose instantly, and with it, a smell so strong my stomach flipped violently. I turned my head just in time. The nausea hit like a wave crashing against my throat. I pressed my hand to the edge of the desk, forcing myself to breathe slowly, carefully. He didn't notice. Or maybe he did. "Your favorite," he said proudly. "I cooked it myself, took hours." 6 months ago, that gesture would have broken me. I would have cried, thanked him, believed it was love. But now I was 3 months pregnant. And no one, especially him, knew. Every morning had become a battle. Smells made me dizzy. Strong food sent my stomach into chaos. I had hidden my pregnancy carefully, afraid of stress, afraid of complications, afraid of the changes it would bring. I forced a smile. "Thank you," I said quietly, "but I already ate at home." His eyes flickered. Just for a second. Then the smile returned, but it didn't reach his eyes. "A little more won't hurt," he insisted, sliding the container closer to me. "You need strength." Something about the way he said it made my skin prickle. There was pressure beneath the softness, expectation, control. I searched his face, hopping to find sincerity, but all I saw was calculation. Just then, the door opened again. His secretary walked in. Young, beautiful, confident in a way that came from knowing she was admired. She wore a fitted dress and a smile that lingered too long on my husband. "Oh, wow," she said brightly. "Breakfast from the boss himself. You're so lucky." My husband didn't respond. He gave a short nod and excused himself, reminding me about a meeting later before leaving the office. The door closed. The smell remained. My stomach churned harder, and I knew I couldn't keep that container near me for another second. So I did something simple. Something ordinary. Something that would change everything. I pushed the container across the desk. "I can't eat it," I said lightly. "It would be a shame to waste all that effort. If you haven't had breakfast, you should take it." Her eyes widened. "Are you serious?" she asked, already reaching for it. "Of course," I replied. "It's still hot." She smiled, bright, grateful, almost triumphant, and hugged the container as if it were a gift meant just for her. "Thank you," she said. "I'll enjoy every bite." She left my office happily. The door clicked shut behind her. The smell finally disappeared. I leaned back in my chair, pressing my hand against my stomach, whispering softly to the life inside me that everything was fine now, that the danger had passed. I believed that. For exactly 1 hour. Because when the scream tore through the office, raw, sharp, and filled with agony, I knew deep in my bones. That breakfast had never been meant to feed me. I thought refusing that breakfast saved me from nausea. I didn't know it had just saved my life. For the next hour, I tried to work. Tried. Numbers blurred on the screen. My fingers hovered over the keyboard without purpose. Every few seconds, my stomach tightened, not from nausea this time, but from something heavier. A sense of wrongness that refused to settle. I kept replaying the moment in my head. His smile. The way he insisted. The pressure in his voice. I told myself I was imagining things. Pregnancy hormones, stress, that was all. I reached for my water glass, took a careful sip, and rested my palm over my belly. The baby responded with a gentle flutter, a quiet reminder that I wasn't alone, that I had to stay calm. "Everything is fine," I whispered. Then the sound came. A heavy thud, like a chair being knocked over, followed by a scream so sharp it sliced through the entire floor. It wasn't fear. It was pain. Pure, raw animal pain. My heart slammed against my ribs as I jumped to my feet. The scream echoed again, louder this time, filled with desperation. Doors flew open. Employees rushed into the hallway. Someone shouted for help. I ran. The closer I got, the thicker the air became, hot, sour, suffocating. The smell hit me first. Food, vomit, blood. When I reached the open area near the desks, my legs stopped moving. She was on the floor. The secretary. Her body twisted unnaturally, hands clutching her stomach as if she were trying to rip something out of herself. The thermal container lay on its side nearby, its contents spilled across the carpet like a grotesque painting. Her face, once carefully made up, was pale, drained of color. Her lips trembled. Foam gathered at the corners of her mouth. Her eyes rolled back as her body convulsed violently. Someone screamed again. Then I saw the blood. Dark red, spreading, soaking into the beige carpet beneath her dress. Time slowed. People shouted. Someone called emergency services. Another person tried to help but froze, unsure of what to do. I stood there, unable to move, my entire body trembling. My mind screamed a single thought over and over. The food. No. No. This couldn't be happening. Then the CEO's office door slammed open. My husband ran out. For a split second, I expected panic, fear, concern. I saw none of that. He stopped abruptly, eyes locked on the floor on the blood. His face changed. Shock, then fear, then something far worse. Ray. Not grief. Not worry. Ray. His gaze snapped upward and landed on me like a weapon. Sharp, accusing, furious. Before I could react, he crossed the distance between us and grabbed my arm, his fingers digging painfully into my skin. "What did you do?" he hissed. "Why her?" The words didn't make sense. Why her? My breath caught in my throat. "What are you talking about?" I whispered. His grip tightened. "Why didn't you eat it?" he demanded under his breath, his eyes wild. "Why did you give it to her?" The hallway went silent around us. In that moment, the world shifted. The scream. The blood. The poisoned food. And his disappointment. It all snapped into place with terrifying clarity. I wrenched my arm free. "I didn't do anything," I said, my voice shaking but cold. "I gave her the food you made. What were you expecting? For me to be the one on the floor?" He froze. For a fraction of a second, his mask cracked. Then the sirens wailed outside. Paramedics rushed in, lifting her onto a stretcher, their movements fast and practiced. She was still alive, but barely. Blood stained their gloves as they wheeled her toward the elevator. My husband followed them instinctively. But before the doors closed, he turned back to me. "You're coming to the hospital," he ordered. "This is your responsibility." The doors shut. I stood there shaking, my arm throbbing where he had grabbed me, my heart pounding so loudly I could barely hear anything else. The man I married wasn't worried about me witnessing something traumatic. He was angry that I had survived. I pressed both hands over my stomach, fighting tears. If I had eaten that food, if nausea hadn't saved me, if I hadn't given it away, I wouldn't be standing here, and neither would my child. As I followed the ambulance to the hospital, one horrifying truth settled deep in my chest. That breakfast had never been an act of love. It had been a test. The scream that echoed through the office wasn't fear. It was pain. And my husband's reaction told me everything. Hospitals have a smell you never forget. Disinfectant, fear, and quiet prayers mixed together. I sat in the waiting room gripping my purse so tightly my fingers ached. My knees bounced uncontrollably, and no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't stop my thoughts from spiraling. If I hadn't been sick that morning, if I hadn't trusted my instincts. My hand slid instinctively to my stomach. I whispered inside my mind, begging my baby to stay calm, to stay safe. Across the room, my husband paced back and forth like a caged animal. His expensive suit was wrinkled, his hair disheveled, his calm executive mask shattered. Every few seconds, he glanced at the emergency room doors, then at me, his eyes sharp with suspicion and something darker. Hatred. Not once did he ask if I was okay. Not once did he ask why I looked pale. Finally, the ER doors opened. A middle-aged doctor stepped out, his expression serious and heavy. My husband rushed toward him, grabbing his arm. "How is she?" he demanded. "Is she going to be okay?" I stood up slowly and walked closer, my legs weak beneath me. The doctor looked between us before speaking. "She survived," he said, "but it was very serious." My husband exhaled sharply, relief flashing across his face. Too fast, too intense. Then the doctor continued. "She suffered acute poisoning. We found a high concentration of a pharmaceutical drug in her system." My breath hitched. "What drug?" my husband asked quickly. The doctor hesitated for half a second before answering. "Misoprostol." The word meant nothing to me. But to my husband, it was devastating. The color drained from his face instantly. His lips parted, but no sound came out. The doctor went on, unaware, or maybe very aware of what he was revealing. "It's a medication used to induce uterine contractions. In extremely high doses, it can cause violent bleeding, organ failure, and loss of pregnancy." Loss of pregnancy. The room tilted. I grabbed the back of a chair to steady myself. "She was pregnant," I whispered. The doctor nodded gravely. 6 weeks. My husband stumbled backward and collapsed into a chair, his head falling into his hands. A broken sound escaped his throat, half gasp, half sob. But I didn't feel sympathy. I felt sick. So that was it. She wasn't just his secretary. She was carrying his child. And the poison meant for me had killed his own, unborn baby instead. The irony was cruel. The police arrived moments later. 2 officers approached us calmly but firmly, explaining that an investigation was already underway. This wasn't a simple case of food poisoning. The dosage was too precise, too intentional. My husband recovered quickly. Too quickly. "This is my wife's fault," he said suddenly, pointing at me. She had the food for over an hour. She must have put something in it. The words sliced through me. I stared at him, stunned. "You're accusing me?" I asked softly. He didn't hesitate. "She's been jealous," he told the officers. "Mentally unstable. She didn't like how close my secretary and I worked together." Every lie came effortlessly. I inhaled slowly and lifted my chin. "I didn't poison anyone," I said calmly. "Check the cameras, check fingerprints. That food was sealed when it arrived." The officers nodded, taking notes. Then the doctor added something that shattered the room into silence. "The drug was completely dissolved into the food," he said. "That means it was added while it was still cooking or extremely hot. It couldn't have been dropped in later." My husband froze. The trap he had built collapsed instantly. If the poison was already mixed in, then the person who cooked the food. I watched realization dawn on the officers' faces. They exchanged looks. My husband began to panic. No, that's impossible," he stammered. "She must have taken it herself. She was pregnant. She wanted an abortion." The doctor shook his head firmly. "The drug was in the stew. There's no doubt." Silence. Then one officer spoke. "Sir, we're going to need you to come with us." My husband looked at me. Really looked at me. For the first time since that morning, fear replaced anger. He had tried to kill me. And instead, he had destroyed his own secret. As the officers escorted him away, I sat down slowly, my body finally giving in to the shock. My hands trembled as I pressed them to my stomach. I was alive. My baby was alive. But I knew one thing with absolute certainty. This wasn't over. Not even close. When the doctor said she was pregnant, I realized the poison wasn't a mistake. It was meant for me. I didn't sleep that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw blood spreading across the office carpet. I heard her scream echoing through the hallways. I felt my husband's grip on my arm, tight, angry, accusing. By morning, my body felt hollow. I sat on the edge of my bed, one hand resting over my stomach, the other clutching my phone. Missed calls, unknown numbers, news alerts I was afraid to open. The story had already started leaking. CEOs, secretary hospitalized after poisoning incident. Suspicious drug found in office meal. They hadn't said his name yet. But they would. At the hospital, the police were waiting for me. 2 detectives this time, a man and a woman, calm voices, sharp eyes, the kind that missed nothing. They asked me to walk them through the entire morning again. Every detail. What time he arrived. What he wore. What he said. How the food smelled. Where it was placed. I answered honestly, even when my voice shook. Then came the question I had been dreading. "Were you aware of your pregnancy before the incident?" the female detective asked. My breath caught. I looked down at my hands, then back up at her. "Yes," I said quietly, "but my husband was." The room went still. The male detective leaned forward. "How far along?" "Almost 3 months." They exchanged a look that told me everything. The poison wasn't random. It wasn't reckless. It was calculated. The female detective spoke carefully. "Misoprostol is commonly used to induce miscarriages. In high doses, it can be fatal." I swallowed hard. "So he didn't just want to end the pregnancy," I said. "He was willing to risk killing me." She didn't argue. Instead, she nodded slowly. "That's what the evidence suggests." A wave of nausea hit me, stronger than anything I'd felt during pregnancy. I pressed my hand to my mouth, forcing myself to breathe. He hadn't just betrayed me. He had planned my death. Later that afternoon, a nurse came to escort me for a routine checkup, just to be safe. My heart raced as the doctor ran tests, checking for traces of the drug. I watched his face closely as he reviewed the results. "Your levels are clean," he said gently. "You didn't ingest any of it." Relief flooded me so fast I nearly cried. "And the baby?" I asked. He smiled softly. "Perfectly fine." I let out a shaky breath, tears finally spilling over. But peace didn't last long. As I stepped out into the hallway, I saw him. My husband. Handcuffed. 2 officers stood on either side of him, but his eyes were locked on me. They weren't pleading. They were furious. "You ruined everything," he snarled as they passed. I froze. "You were supposed to eat it," he hissed. "She wasn't part of the plan." The words hit me harder than any slap ever could. Not a mistake. Not an accident. A plan. The officers pulled him away before I could respond, but the damage was done. That night, I finally allowed myself to break. I sat on the floor of my living room, arms wrapped around myself, shaking. The man I shared a bed with had chosen another woman's child over mine and tried to erase me to protect his lie. And then I remembered something. The kitchen. The night before. He had cooked late, claimed he was experimenting with a new recipe. I had gone to bed early, exhausted. I grabbed my phone and called the detective. "There might be something in our house," I said. "Check the trash, the cabinets, the spice rack." They did. The next morning, I got the call. They found it. An empty blister pack hidden behind a stack of unused cookbooks. Prescription-grade misoprostol. No label, no patient name. And something else. A burner phone. With dozens of messages between my husband and someone, saved only as M. The messages were cold, strategic, precise. How much? Enough to make it look natural. She can't know. I stared at the screenshots, my hands shaking. He hadn't acted alone. Someone had helped him. And I was about to find out who. The poison was never meant to be discovered. And the messages on that burner phone proved he wasn't working alone. The name M burned into my mind. I stared at it on the detective's tablet as if it might suddenly reveal a face, a voice, anything human. But it stayed cold and faceless, just a single letter hiding behind carefully worded messages. Whoever M was, they knew exactly what they were doing. "How confident are you that this person supplied the drug?" I asked. The detective didn't hesitate. "Very." She scrolled through the messages slowly, letting each one sink in. "M, it has to be precise. Too much and it looks suspicious." "Husband, I need it to work. She can't suspect anything." "M, then don't rush. Timing matters." I felt something snap inside me. This wasn't desperation. This was planning. They weren't talking like lovers in panic. They sounded like partners in a business deal. "Do you know anyone with access to prescription medication?" the detective asked. I thought back carefully. My husband had always been obsessed with control, his health, his image, his future. He had connections everywhere: doctors, pharmacists, consultants. Then it hit me. "There's a woman," I said slowly. "A pharmacist. He mentioned her once years ago, said they dated briefly before we married." The detective's eyes sharpened. "What's her name?" I told them. Within hours, they had a full profile. She owned a small but respected pharmacy. Clean record, no criminal history, but there was something else: financial trouble, heavy debts, a pending lawsuit. Motivation. They brought her in for questioning that same evening. I wasn't there, but I watched the footage later. She sat stiffly across from the officers, arms crossed, lips pressed tight, calm, confident, until they placed the blister pack photo in front of her. Her composure cracked instantly. "I didn't know what he was going to do with it," she said quickly. "He told me it was for personal reasons." "For whom?" the detective asked. "For his wife," she admitted. "He said she asked for it." "Lie." I could hear it in her voice, even through the screen. They showed her the messages, the timestamps, the dosage instructions, the warnings. Her shoulders sagged. "He said she was pregnant with another man's child," she whispered. "He said it would destroy his reputation." I laughed bitterly when I heard that. He had rewritten reality so completely that even his accomplice believed his lies. "He promised me money," she continued. "Enough to clear my debts. He said no one would get hurt. But someone did get hurt. Someone almost died. Someone lost a child. When they charged her as an accessory, she cried. Not for the unborn baby, not for me. For herself. Meanwhile, my husband was unraveling. The confident executive image collapsed the moment the charges became public. His company placed him on immediate suspension. Investors fled. The board demanded answers he couldn't give. And still, he tried to blame me. From his holding cell, he requested a meeting. Against everyone's advice, I agreed. I needed to see him. To hear him say it. They brought him into the visitation room, orange uniform replacing his tailored suit. His eyes were sunken, his face unshaven. But his voice, still sharp, still bitter. "You always had to ruin things," he said before I could speak. I stared at him, stunned by the audacity. "You tried to kill me," I replied calmly, "and our child." He leaned forward. "I was protecting my future," he said. "You were a complication." The words settled like ice in my chest. "A complication," I repeated. "You were getting too emotional, too unpredictable. A baby would have made it worse." I stood up slowly. "You don't get to rewrite what you did," I said. "You don't get to call murder protection." His eyes flicked to my stomach. "Is it still alive?" he asked flatly. That was the moment I stopped seeing him as my husband. "Yes," I said, "and you'll never touch my child." As I walked out, I felt lighter than I had in months. But the case wasn't over. Because the detectives uncovered something even darker buried inside his financial records. Something that proved the poison wasn't the first step. It was the final one. I thought the poison was his worst crime. Until the investigation uncovered what he had been planning long before that morning. I thought I had reached the bottom of the nightmare. I was wrong. 2 days after my meeting with him, the detectives called me back in. Their voices were calm, but there was an edge beneath their professionalism that made my stomach tighten the moment I heard it. "We found something in your husband's financial records," the female detective said. "You need to see this." They sat me down in a quiet room and slid a thick folder across the table. Inside were bank statements, insurance documents, and transaction logs dating back nearly a year. Nearly a year. My fingers trembled as I flipped through the pages. There it was. A life insurance policy taken out in my name, without my knowledge. The amount made my breath catch. 7 figures. He listed himself as the sole beneficiary, the detective explained, and the policy was finalized 6 months ago. 6 months. Before I was pregnant. Before the secretary. Before the poison. This wasn't a sudden decision, fueled by panic. It was premeditated. He also moved assets into offshore accounts, the detective continued. Properties, investments, shell companies, all positioned to activate in the event of your death. I felt dizzy. So, even if I died suddenly, I whispered, everything would have looked clean. Yes, she said. A tragic complication, a grieving husband. My stomach twisted violently. The poison wasn't the beginning of his plan. It was the fastest option. The backup plan. As I absorbed the truth, another realization slammed into me, one that hurt almost as much as the attempted murder itself. He had been planning a life without me long before he decided to erase me. That afternoon, I went home for the first time since the incident. Police had already searched the house. Drawers were left open, cabinets disturbed. The space felt violated, unfamiliar. Like I didn't belong there anymore. I walked into the kitchen slowly. The same kitchen where he had cooked that meal. The stove was spotless. The counters gleamed. But I could see it now, the careful preparation, the measured dosage, the deliberate calm. I opened the trash bin beneath the sink. Empty. Too empty. He had cleaned thoroughly. But not thoroughly enough. I checked the recycling bin outside. At the bottom, hidden beneath cardboard and plastic, was a grocery receipt. Time-stamped. Ingredients for the meal. And something else. A line item that didn't belong. Medical supplies. I handed it over to the detectives later that night. They traced the purchase. It led to another woman. Not the pharmacist. Someone closer. Someone I had trusted. My assistant. The one who scheduled my meetings. Handled my calls. Managed my calendar. She had purchased the supplies using a company card, under my husband's authorization. When they brought her in for questioning, she broke quickly. She hadn't known about the poison, she claimed. She believed she was helping him prepare for an emergency. He told me you were sick, she said through tears. That you were hiding it, that he needed supplies just in case. Lies layered upon lies. She wasn't charged, but she was fired, and the guilt destroyed her. Meanwhile, my husband was spiraling. Denied bail. Charged with attempted murder. Conspiracy. Fraud. Still, he tried to control the narrative. He released a statement through his lawyer claiming emotional distress, marital instability, and mental health struggles. I watched it on the news, my hands resting protectively over my stomach. He spoke about love, about regret, about misunderstanding. But there was one thing he never mentioned. The poison. Because no story could justify that. That night, I sat alone in a quiet room provided by the authorities, listening to the soft rhythm of my own breathing. For the first time since that morning, the fear began to loosen its grip. Not because the danger was gone, but because the truth was finally louder than his lies. I wasn't a complication. I was a survivor. And my child would grow up knowing exactly how close we came to being erased. But the case still wasn't finished. Because one final secret, hidden deep in his emails, was about to surface. A secret that proved the secretary wasn't just collateral damage. She had been part of his plan, too. The poison wasn't the first step in his plan. And the emails we uncovered proved the secretary was never meant to survive either. When the detective said the secretary's name again, my chest tightened. I thought I already understood what had happened. I thought she was a mistake, an unintended victim who happened to be in the wrong place at the wrong time. I was wrong. She wasn't collateral damage, the detective said quietly. She was part of his timeline. They opened a laptop and turned it toward me. Emails. Dozens of them. All sent from a private account I had never seen before. My husband had been planning for months, documenting everything like a man preparing for a merger instead of murder. One subject line froze me completely. Phase 2 contingency. I swallowed hard. The detective scrolled. The emails described scenarios, probabilities, risks. And then I saw her name. Not as a person, as a variable. She was pregnant, the detective said, and that wasn't supposed to happen. I felt sick. He never planned to leave her, she continued, but he never planned to keep her either. The emails explained it clearly. If I miscarried quietly, the marriage would continue until he could divorce me cleanly. If I died, the insurance would activate and the scandal would be manageable. But if his mistress gave birth, that child would expose everything. So he prepared a solution. The poison. 1 dose. 2 possible outcomes. If I ate it, problem solved. If she ate it, problem solved. Either way, the pregnancy disappeared. My vision blurred as tears filled my eyes. She trusted him, I whispered. Yes, the detective said softly, and that's why she was easy to manipulate. The secretary believed she was loved, that he would leave me, that they would raise their child together. But the truth, he never intended to let her live long enough to tell the story. I remembered her smile, the way she hugged the food container, the gratitude in her voice. My knees nearly gave out. What about her now? I asked. The detective hesitated. She survived, but the damage is permanent. She would never be able to have children again. The silence between us was heavy. 2 women. 2 pregnancies. 1 man who saw both as problems to erase. Later that day, I was allowed to visit her. She lay pale against white hospital sheets, machines humming quietly beside her. Her eyes widened when she saw me. I didn't know, she whispered immediately. I swear, he said you didn't want the baby. He said you were sick. I believed her. I could hear the truth in her voice, the same truth I had once believed myself. He was never going to leave me, I said gently, and he was never going to protect you. Her face crumpled. I loved him, she sobbed. I know, I replied. That's why he chose you. Before I left, she reached for my hand. He asked me to eat it, she whispered. He said it was safe. He watched me take the first bite. That sentence echoed in my head all night. He watched. Not panicked. Not worried. Watching. The trial date was set shortly after. Media pressure exploded. Headlines turned vicious. The company publicly disowned him. Former partners released statements denying knowledge. And still, he tried to contact me. Letters. Apologies. Excuses. 1 line repeated again and again. I never meant for things to go this far. But that was a lie. Because the evidence proved, he knew exactly how far it would go. And he chose it anyway. The night before the trial, I sat alone, feeling my baby move gently inside me. A reminder of life, fragile, stubborn, powerful. I wasn't afraid anymore. I was ready. Because the next day, the world would hear everything. Every plan. Every message. Every lie. And he would finally face what he had done. He thought the courtroom would protect him. But he didn't know what evidence was about to be revealed in front of everyone. The courtroom was silent in a way that felt unnatural. Not peaceful. Tense. Every seat was filled. Reporters lined the walls, cameras poised like predators waiting for blood. I could feel their eyes on me as I walked to my seat, one hand resting protectively over my stomach. Across the room, my husband sat beside his attorneys. He looked smaller. Not weaker, just exposed. The man who once controlled boardrooms now avoided eye contact, his jaw clenched tightly as if holding himself together by force alone. The prosecution began methodically. They didn't rush. They wanted the jury to understand exactly who he was before they showed what he had done. Emails first. Messages projected onto massive screens, every calculated word enlarged for the entire courtroom to see. Phase 1. Phase 2 contingency. Acceptable outcomes. Gasps rippled through the audience. His lawyer tried to object, too late. The judge allowed it all. Then came the financial trail. The insurance policy. The offshore accounts. The asset transfers timed carefully around my medical appointments. I watched the jurors, faces change as realization set in. This wasn't an accident. This was a strategy. When they called me to testify, my legs shook, but my voice didn't. I told them about the breakfast, the smell, the nausea, the insistence. I told them about the scream, about his words in the hallway. Why didn't you eat it? That sentence hit harder than any evidence. I saw one juror wipe away tears. Then they brought in the secretary. She walked slowly, her body still recovering, her face pale but determined. Her voice cracked as she spoke. He told me it was safe, she said. He told me he made it for her, but she didn't want it. She paused, swallowing hard. He watched me eat. The courtroom erupted. The judge banged his gavel repeatedly, demanding order, but the damage was done. My husband finally looked up. His eyes met mine across the room. For the first time, I didn't see anger. I saw fear. The prosecution ended with the medical expert. The doctor explained the dosage, the effects, the certainty of death or miscarriage. There is no scenario where this was harmless, he said firmly. Only intent. The defense tried to argue emotional distress, mental health, a man overwhelmed by pressure. But the jury wasn't listening anymore. During a recess, my husband's attorney approached me quietly. He's willing to take a plea, she said, if you agree not to pursue further civil action. I laughed softly. You don't understand, I replied. This isn't about money. When the verdict was read, I held my breath. Guilty, the foreperson said. One word. Then another. And another. Attempted murder. Conspiracy. Fraud. My husband collapsed into his chair. Sentencing came quickly. Decades. The judge's voice was steady. You treated human life as a business inconvenience, she said, and the court will respond accordingly. As officers led him away, he turned back one last time. I loved you, he said weakly. I didn't answer. Because love doesn't come with poison. Outside the courthouse, cameras flashed violently. Microphones pushed toward me. I said only one thing. I survived. That night, for the first time since the nightmare began, I slept peacefully. But closure didn't come immediately. Because there was one final confrontation left. One conversation I had avoided until now. And it would change how this story truly ended. I thought the verdict was the end. Until he asked to see me one last time from prison. I ignored the first letter. Then the second. By the third, I realized he wasn't going to stop. They all said the same thing, written in the same tight, controlled handwriting I knew so well. Please, just once, I need to explain. Explain what? How he measured poison in grams. How he ranked women like business risks. How close my child came to never existing. Still, curiosity has a cruel way of resurfacing when pain begins to settle. So I agreed. The prison visiting room was colder than I expected. Gray walls, plastic chairs bolted to the floor, guards watching every movement like statues with guns. They brought him in wearing orange. No suit. No confidence. No control. He looked older, smaller. His hands trembled as he sat across from me, separated by nothing more than a narrow table. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then he smiled. The same smile that once convinced investors and charmed strangers. "You look healthy," he said. I didn't answer. "They tell me it's a boy," he continued, trying to sound casual. "Is that true?" My stomach tightened. "You don't get to ask about my child," I said calmly. His smile faltered. "I never wanted things to go this far," he said softly. "I panicked." "No," I replied. "You planned." The word landed heavily between us. He looked down at his hands. "I made mistakes," he said, "but I loved you." I leaned forward slightly. "If you loved me," I said, "you wouldn't have tried to erase me." Silence. He swallowed hard. "I was scared," he admitted. "I thought everything I built would disappear." I almost laughed. "You were scared of losing money," I said. "I was scared of losing my life." He finally looked at me, really looked. "There's no future for me now," he whispered. "But there could be one for you. I can still help." "Help how?" I asked. He hesitated. "My name still has value," he said quietly. "If you speak kindly of me publicly, if you tell them it was a misunderstanding, I can make sure you're taken care of." I stared at him in disbelief. Even now, even here. He thought everything had a price. I stood up. "You don't understand," I said. "I don't need your protection anymore." His voice cracked. "At least let me meet him," he begged. "Just once." I shook my head. "He already has everything you never gave, safety." As I turned to leave, he said my name one last time. I paused. "Do you know what hurts the most?" he asked. I looked back at him. That I failed. I met his gaze evenly. "No," I said, "that you succeeded once at pretending to be human." I walked out without looking back. Outside, the sun felt warmer, brighter. That night, I went through my apartment one last time, packing away reminders of the past. Documents, photos, a life that no longer belonged to me. The divorce was finalized quickly. His name was removed from everything, including the birth certificate. But there was still one thing left to do. One final moment of closure. And it would come when my child was finally born. I thought walking out of that prison ended his story in my life. But the final chapter was written the day my son was born. Labor began just before sunrise. There was no panic this time, no fear spiraling in my chest, only focus, only breath, only the quiet certainty that I had already survived worse. As the hospital room filled with soft light and steady voices, I thought about how close this moment had come to never existing. One meal, one lie, one decision that could have erased everything. But it didn't. Because I listened to my body. Because I trusted a feeling I couldn't explain. Because life sometimes fights back. When my son cried for the first time, the sound shattered something deep inside me, something heavy I had been carrying for months. Tears streamed down my face as they placed him on my chest, warm and perfect and real. He was alive. Strong. Safe. Mine. The nurse smiled gently. "He's beautiful." "Yes," I whispered. "He really is." I gave him my last name. Not his father's. Mine. In the days that followed, news of the birth quietly replaced the old headlines. The story that once defined me faded into the background, replaced by something better, something real. Motherhood. I moved cities, changed my routine, built a life that didn't revolve around fear or recovery, but around growth. Sometimes people would ask, carefully, respectfully, how I managed to move on after everything. I always gave the same answer. I didn't move on, I said. I moved forward. Months later, I received one final letter. From prison. I didn't open it. Instead, I placed it in a drawer and locked it away, not because I was afraid, but because I no longer needed answers from a man who had chosen poison over love. The court eventually ruled in my favor in the civil case. Every asset he had tried to hide was reclaimed, not as revenge, but as protection. My son would grow up secure, and he would grow up knowing the truth. Not about betrayal, but about resilience. About how his mother survived when she was meant to disappear. Years from now, when he asks why I'm so careful with food, why I trust my instincts so deeply, why I believe quiet feelings matter, I'll tell him this. Because listening saved your life. Sometimes, late at night, I think about that morning. The smell, the container, the choice. And I realize something important. Evil doesn't always arrive loudly. Sometimes it smiles. Sometimes it cooks. Sometimes it calls itself love. But strength listens. Strength survives. Strength walks away alive. And as I hold my son close, watching him sleep peacefully, I know one truth will always remain. He tried to poison me. But instead, he gave me the proof that I was stronger than he ever imagined. Some betrayals don't break you. They reveal who you were always meant to become.